Thursday, 2:20 in the afternoon, Harwick and Dunn Catering Supply on the edge of Halifax, and a black Velmer town car pulled into the loading dock like it had been sent to correct a mistake. Lena Velmer stepped out in a charcoal wool coat, the kind that did not wrinkle in transit, her heels finding the wet asphalt without hesitation. She had flown in from Toronto that morning and had not eaten since the airport. She did not look like someone who had not eaten since the airport. She did not look like someone who had not eaten since the airport. The warehouse floor was loud. Forklifts, shrink wrap, the low groan of the cold storage unit cycling on. 3 men in Harwick polo shirts stood near the loading bay watching her walk toward them, and one of them, a man named Craig Dunn, second-generation owner and first-generation loud talker, stepped forward with his arms out like he was welcoming someone to a barbecue he had organized in her honor. He barely glanced at the man crouched beside the refrigeration unit with a wrench in his hand. "That's just Everett," Craig said, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "Don't mind him. He's our charity case. Fixed his things that aren't broken. Breaks things he doesn't understand." He laughed. The 2 men behind him laughed because that was what you did when Craig laughed. Lena did not laugh. She did not flinch either. She looked at Craig for exactly the amount of time it takes to understand someone, which was about 4 seconds. And then her eyes moved past him to the man by the refrigeration unit. Everett had not looked up. He was listening to the compressor cycle. She could tell because his head was tilted very slightly to the left, the way a person tilts their head when they are hearing something they have heard before in a different register. She filed that away. Craig was already moving toward the conference room, already talking about the Velmer account, about quarterly projections, about how honored Harwick and Dunn were to be considered for the Velmer catering contract. He had a PowerPoint. She could feel it coming. "We need the audit first," she said. "Full inventory. Cold storage, dry storage, loading protocols, all of it." Craig's smile stayed in place, but something behind it shifted. "Of course, absolutely." He turned and pointed at Everett. "Caldwell, leave that and pull the cold storage logs for the last 6 months. The lady needs numbers." Everett has set the wrench down carefully. He stood. He was taller than he looked crouching. He had grease on the back of his right hand and a small cut on his chin from something that had happened earlier and had not been worth stopping for. He walked to the filing cabinet at the back of the floor without a word. "That one," Craig said, dropping his voice to the register menus when they want to sound like they're being generous, "has been here 4 years and still can't figure out the invoicing system. Good with his hands. Not much else. You know the type." Lena did not answer him. She was watching Everett pull the logs. He did not look at the labels. He went straight to the drawer, pulled the right folder on the first try, did not rifle through it. He knew where everything was because he was the one who had organized it. And she knew that because a man who cannot figure out an invoicing system does not build a filing system that precise. She accepted the folder when he brought it over. Their eyes met for the first time. He had a quality she had not expected, not defiance, not resentment, though both would have been reasonable. Something quieter. The look of a man who had decided a long time ago that what other people said about him was not his business. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and went back to the compressor. Craig had not noticed any of this. Craig was already holding the conference room door open. She went in. She sat down. She opened the folder. In the second row of numbers, she found it. The cold storage unit had been cycling irregularly for 11 weeks. Not dramatically. Not enough to trigger an automatic flag. But in the log, if you knew what you were looking for, the temperature variance told a story. 1.8 degrees Celsius above the contracted threshold. Sustained over 4 hours twice a week, every week for 11 weeks. Food safe, technically. But below the standard her company required for pharmaceutical-grade catering supply. The kind of variance that would void a Velmer contract the moment it was discovered on their end. Craig did not know she knew what she was looking for. She closed the folder and asked him to walk her through the cold storage unit personally. He did. He explained the system to her, the way men explain things to women they have already decided do not understand machinery. She let him finish. Then she asked, very quietly, about the secondary thermostat on the upper bay door seal. Craig stopped. "What secondary thermostat?" She looked at him, then she looked at the unit. Then she looked past both of them to where Everett had resumed work on the compressor, his back to the room, his movements unhurried. He knew about the door seal. She could tell by the way his shoulders did not move when she said it, the way a person goes still when they hear a problem they have already identified and reported and been ignored about. Craig recovered fast. He laughed. He said something about the seal being on the maintenance schedule. He said Everett had flagged it 2 months ago and they were waiting on the part. She looked at Craig. Then she looked at the folder in her hand. The log went back 11 weeks. She did not say that. She said, "I'd like 5 minutes with your floor staff. Individually, if that's all right." It was not all right. Craig's face said so, even as his mouth said, "Of course, absolutely, whatever you need." She spoke to the other two first. They told her nothing she did not already know. Then Everett came in and sat across from her in the small room off the loading bay that smelled like cardboard and old coffee, and she set the folder on the table between them. "When did you flag the door seal?" she asked. 9 weeks ago, he said. "In writing. I put it in the maintenance log and sent a follow-up email to Craig on a Tuesday. He said the part was on order." She nodded. "Is it on order?" He looked at her steadily. "I checked a supplier account last week. No order has been placed." She looked at him for a long moment. His hands were folded on the table. The cut on his chin had already started to close on its own. He had not bothered with a bandage. "Why are you still here?" she asked, not unkindly. "If you flagged it and nothing happened." He was quiet for a moment. "Dan," he said, "I've got a daughter in grade 2 at Quinpool Road School, 8 minutes from this building. The next closest job that pays the same is in Dartmouth. She takes the bus home on Tuesdays. I don't want her on the bus in the dark." He said it without self-pity. "The way you state a fact about weather, the way you say the bridge is out so you take the long way." She looked at the folder. She looked at him. "What's your name?" "Full name. Everett Sohn." She wrote it down, not because she would forget it. She wrote it because she wanted him to see that she had written it. He noticed. She could tell because something very small changed in his expression, the way a room changes when someone opens a window. Not dramatic. Just a shift in air. She stood. She thanked him. He went back to the floor. In the conference room, Craig had set out a tray of coffees and printed copies of the PowerPoint. He talked for 20 minutes about capacity and delivery radius and their new fleet of refrigerated vans. She listened. She asked 2 questions. She picked up her coat. "I'll be in touch," she said. Craig walked her to the door. He was already calculating what the Velmer contract would mean for his Q2. He shook her hand. He told her it had been a genuine pleasure. He did not look at Everett on her way out. She did. Everett was on his knees beside the compressor again. A girl had appeared at the loading dock door, small, red backpack, hair in 2 braids that had started the day neat and were now conducting their own separate negotiations with gravity. She was holding a juice box and looking at her father's back with the patience of someone who had learned that patience was the price of a parent who worked with his hands. Everett turned around before the girl said anything. He always knew when she was there. "Hey, Maisie Bug." "Hi, Dad." The man at the front said I could come in. Everett looked toward the front office, toward Craig's closed door, and his jaw tightened by 1 degree. Then he let it go. He stood and put one hand on top of her head, briefly. "The way you touch something you are making sure is still real. Sit on the bench. Don't touch the forklift. I'll be done in 20 minutes. Maisie sat on the bench. She pulled a book from the backpack and opened it. She was missing 1 front tooth. The book was too advanced for grade 2. Lena noticed all 3 things as she was walking out. She sat in the town car for 6 minutes before she told her driver to go. That night, in the Halifax office, she kept for exactly this kind of trip. A 3rd-floor suite with 1 desk and a view of the harbor she never looked at. She pulled the Harwick and Dunn file and went back further than 6 months. 4 years back. The full maintenance history, vendor contracts, staff records, everything her due diligence request had entitled her to access, and that Craig had submitted in a zip pile she suspected he had not fully read before sending. Everett Sohn appeared in the staff file as a warehouse technician hired 4 years ago, no prior notes. But in the equipment records, every piece of machinery on that floor had a service log, and every log for every major repair in 4 years had the same initials in the technician field. ES. She pulled the original equipment specs for the cold storage units. Two Velmer brand commercial units purchased in 2019, installed by a certified refrigeration contractor out of Moncton. The installation manual for the upper bay unit was included in the file. Technical notes on page 12, handwritten in the margin in small block letters. Correction to the door seal calibration spec. The manufacturer's printed figure was wrong by a decimal point. The handwritten figure was right. At the bottom of the note, in the same hand, Velmer Tech, March 2019. She picked up her phone. She did not call anyone. She set it back down. She opened her laptop instead and searched the Velmer Group internal contractor archive, which she could access because she was Lena Velmer and the archive was hers. The name did not appear. She searched the subsidiary records. Halifax Marine Provisions, 2017 to 2019, a cold chain consultancy her father had quietly folded into Velmer Group just before he retired. There. A consulting agreement, 14 months, termination noted as voluntary, no cause. The name on the agreement was E. Song. The specialization listed was refrigeration systems engineering and cold chain compliance. She sat very still for a moment. Then she called the one person who would answer at 10:45 on a Thursday. His name was Frank, and he had been her father's operations director for 11 years before he retired to a property outside Truro with a wood shop and strong opinions about weather. "Frank," she said when he picked up. "Halifax Marine Provisions. Tell me about E. Sohn." Silence on the line. Longer than she expected. "Lena, Frank, where did you find that name?" "In a maintenance log." "He's working in a warehouse, Frank, fixing compressors." Another silence. Then, quietly, "That man designed the thermal compliance protocol your entire cold chain still runs on. Every refrigerated van in your father's fleet, the temperature monitoring system, the door seal calibration standards. All of it came from 14 months of work he did for us in Halifax." She waited. "His wife died," Frank said. 2020. Brain aneurysm. She was 31. He had a baby at home. He called your father's office and asked to be released from the contract early. Your father said yes. No penalty, no questions. He said that was the right thing to do, and he was correct. What happened to the protocol attribution? The line was quiet. "Frank, when we folded Halifax Marine into Velmer Group, the legal team repackaged the IP, standard acquisition process. His name came off the documentation. There was supposed to be a compensation agreement. I don't know if it was ever executed. I was already transitioning out. I should have checked." He paused. "I should have checked." She put the phone down on the desk without hanging up. She could hear Frank breathing on the other end. She let him. After a moment, she picked it back up. "Thank you, Frank. Lena, be careful how you do this." She ended the call, at the same hour, in a two-bedroom apartment on Cunard Street. Everett sat on the edge of Maisie's bed after she had fallen asleep and did not immediately get up. This was a habit. He allowed himself 5 minutes in the doorway after the light went out, just to listen to her breathe. He had started doing it when she was 6 weeks old, and he did not see a reason to stop. Then he went to the kitchen and ate the dinner he had not eaten earlier, standing at the counter because sitting down felt like a decision, and he did not have the energy for decisions at 10:30 at night. There was a folder on the counter. He had brought it from work. He did not open it. He just looked at it. Inside was a photocopy of a maintenance request he had submitted 9 weeks ago. Craig's initials at the bottom, accepted, and below that, in different pen, a note Craig had added without telling him. Hold. Non-critical. Source, alternative solution. He had found it in the filing cabinet 3 days ago. He had not told anyone. He put the folder back without opening it. He went to bed. He lay in the dark and thought about the woman in the charcoal coat who had asked him about the secondary thermostat. Not because she had read about it somewhere. Because she had looked at the unit and known it should be there. That was not the question of someone checking a box. He did not know what to do with that, and so he put it away and went to sleep. Lena came back the next morning. She was not wearing a wool coat this time. Dark jeans, a navy quarter zip, hair pulled back. She came through the loading dock entrance and not the front door. Craig saw her from the office window and moved fast. "Ms. Velmer." He was already pulling on his professional face, the good one, not the Tuesday face he wore when suppliers called about late invoices. I wasn't expecting you until next week. I know, she said. She kept walking. Everett. Everett was at the packing table running an inventory check. He looked up. I need you to walk me through the door seal issue. Specifically what you found, when, and what you reported. Craig stepped forward. I can actually speak to that. I have the documentation. She did not turn around. Everett, a muscle in Craig's jaw moved. He stopped. Everett walked her to the cold storage unit. He showed her the seal. He showed her where the calibration had drifted, the specific hinge point, the gap that appeared at operational temperature. He did not use jargon for its own sake. He explained it the way a person explains something they understand completely but have learned not to expect anyone else to care about. She asked 4 questions. He answered them exactly. He did not fill the silence between questions with reassurance or padding. He let her think. When was the last time the upper bay held sustained target temperature? She asked. He did not hesitate. 11 weeks and 4 days ago. How do you know the 4 days? Because I have a personal log, not a company log, mine. She looked at him. Can I see it? He went to his locker. He came back with a small spiral notebook, the kind you buy at a pharmacy. The cover bent from being in a back pocket. He handed it to her. She leafed through it. Every entry dated. Temperature readings taken at shift, start, mid-shift, and end of shift, going back 14 months. She handed it back. This is very good work, she said. He took the notebook back and put it in his pocket and said nothing because it was not a compliment that required a response. It was just accurate. Craig had been standing 8 feet away through all of this, and his neck had gone the color of brick. When Lena turned around, she looked at him for a long moment. The way she had looked at the temperature logs, reading something that had already told her what she needed to know. I'll need all maintenance records, all supplier correspondence, and all internal emails relating to this unit going back 2 years, she said. By end of day. Craig opened his mouth. Of course. He closed it. Then, because he could not stop himself, I want you to know, Miss Tybley, Velmer, that Everett here sometimes escalates things beyond their actual. Everett packed his bag and had nothing left to hold back on. Lena's voice was very quiet when she cut Craig off. The document I'd like to review, she said, is the one showing the part was ordered 9 weeks ago. Craig said nothing. She waited. He said nothing. She nodded, as though he had answered. She walked out to the loading dock. The November air came off the harbor with purpose. Behind her she heard Craig say something to Everett in a low voice, and she did not hear the words. But she heard the tone and she stopped walking. She turned around. Craig looked at her. If I hear that tone directed at this employee again before this review is complete, she said, the review will not need to be completed because the outcome will already be clear. She held his gaze for 2 more seconds. Then she left. Maisie appeared at the loading dock at 3:22. Same red backpack, same independent braids, this time carrying a drawing she had made at school of a polar bear standing on ice, which she presented to the man at the receiving desk because she had decided he needed it. Everett intercepted her before she made it past the dock doors. You're supposed to wait in the car with Sandra, he said. Sandra said I could come in. Everett made a note to discuss decision-making authority with Sandra, who was his neighbor and collected Maisie on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and was, unfortunately, constitutionally unable to say no to a 6-year-old with a drawing. He walked her to the bench. Maisie sat down and kicked her feet and looked around the warehouse with the clear-eyed evaluation of someone cataloging assets. The coat lady was here again, she said. Everett looked at her. How do you know that? Sandra drove past the parking lot. Her car was there. It's a black Velmer. You can tell because the badge is different. Everett looked at his daughter for a moment. She is 6, he thought. She is going to be exhausting when she's 16. Yes, he said. She was here. Maisie thought about this. Is she nice? He picked up the inventory clipboard. I don't know yet. Maisie seemed to find this acceptable. She opened her book. She read 3 pages and then looked up. She seems nice, she said, with the authority of someone who had made her own assessment and was sharing it as a courtesy. He went back to work. That evening, Lena was in the Harborview office again and she had Frank on the phone. And she had the Velmer Group legal department on the phone. And she had a property record open on her laptop that had cost her 30 minutes and 1 call to a contact at the Halifax Regional Municipality to locate. The cold chain compliance protocol developed by E. Son for Halifax Marine Provisions in 2018 and 2019 had been assigned to Velmer Group IP Holdings in the acquisition standard process, except that the compensation agreement Frank had mentioned, the one that was supposed to have been executed, had not been. There was a draft. There was an email chain in which a junior lawyer had asked twice for sign-off. There was no signature. Somewhere in the administrative shuffle of folding Halifax Marine into the larger company, a man had lost the rights to work that was still actively used and still actively generating compliance savings across a fleet of 62 refrigerated vehicles. She did not sleep well. In the morning, she drove to Quinpool Road Elementary at 5 minutes to 8 and sat in the Subaru her assistant had sourced because the town car made people uncomfortable, and she watched Maisie Sohn climb out of a neighbor's sedan and walk toward the school with her red backpack and her polar bear drawing tucked under one arm. Maisie stopped at the door. She turned around and looked at the Subaru with the directness of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she is not looking. Then she waved. Lena, after a moment, waved back. That afternoon, she walked into Craig Dunn's office without knocking. He was on the phone. He held up one finger. She sat down across from his desk and waited. It took him approximately 4 seconds to end the call. "I've completed the initial review," she said. "I'll be sending a formal letter by end of week. In the meantime, I want to be transparent about one item." Craig arranged his face into its reasonable expression. "The cold storage maintenance issue represents a direct breach of the temperature compliance threshold in our provisional supplier agreement," she said. "The failure to action a flagged repair over a 9-week period, combined with the absence of a parts order that was represented as being in progress, means we cannot proceed with the Harwick and Dunn contract in its current form." Craig went still. She kept her voice even. "I'm also flagging an issue with your staffing structure that is not relevant to the contract decision, but that I want you to understand I have noted. An employee identified a compliance problem in writing, followed up formally, and was told the matter was being handled. It was not handled. That employee is the most operationally qualified person in this building. The way that is managed going forward is your decision, not mine. But I would think carefully about it." Craig's face had cycled to several colors and landed somewhere in the red family. "Miss Velmer," he said, "with respect, Everett Caldwell is a warehouse hand. He has ideas above his station and—" "Everett Sohn," she said. Craig stopped. "His name is Everett Sohn," she said, "not Caldwell." She stood and picked up her coat. "I'd suggest learning it." She walked out. The drive back through downtown Halifax took 14 minutes. She used 11 of them thinking, and 3 of them parked outside a coffee shop on Barrington Street that she had been to twice in her life, but that she could walk to from where Everett worked, and that fact had occurred to her, and she was not sure what to do with it, and so she sat in the car and looked at the door of the coffee shop until she knew. She went in. She bought 2 coffees. She drove back to the warehouse. Everett was loading a pallet when she came through the loading dock. He straightened when he saw her. She held out one of the cups. He took it. He looked at it, then at her. "I've pulled the review," she said. "Harwick and Dunn is not going to receive the Velmer contract." He said nothing. "There's something else." She looked at the cup in her own hand. She had not planned to say this in a warehouse next to a pallet jack. She said it anyway. "Your work from Halifax Marine Provisions. The cold chain protocol. It's been in active use across our fleet for 4 years. There was supposed to be a compensation agreement executed when we acquired the IP. It wasn't. That's a failure on our part, and I intend to correct it." Everett was very still. "How do you know about Halifax Marine?" he said. "Your initials were in the installation manual for the cold storage unit, the one you corrected on page 12. He looked at the cup in his hands. He looked at the floor. He set the cup down on the edge of the pallet and pressed both hands flat against the cardboard and stood like that for a moment, not moving. She waited. When he looked up, his eyes were very clear in the way eyes go when someone has been holding something for a long time and feels the weight of it shift. Just slightly. Just enough. "My wife liked the work I did there," he said. "She used to read the compliance reports. She'd mark the pages where my arguments were strongest. She thought it was funny that refrigerators needed lawyers." He paused. "Her name was Carrie's." Lena held the information carefully, the way you hold something that has been given to you by someone who does not give things easily. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded. He picked up the cup again. I have a meeting with our IP legal team next week, she said. I'd like you to be in it. He looked at her. What would I be doing in that meeting? Telling them what you told me. What you found, when you found it, what you reported, the same way you told me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'd need to be back by 3:20. She almost smiled. I'll have you back by noon. He looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded. She walked out. He watched her go and then picked up the pallet jack and went back to work and did not think about anything except the work for the next 40 minutes, which was the longest he had not thought about, something in several months. The meeting with the IP legal team happened on a Wednesday in a boardroom on the 9th floor of the Velmer Group building on Hollis Street. Everett wore his good jacket and clean boots and brought the spiral notebook. He was not nervous. He had been in rooms like this before, in a different life, and what he remembered was that the people in them were mostly just people who had been in other rooms like this, the whole way down. He told them what he had found. He told them what he had found. He told them what he had flagged. He showed them the notebook which they photographed and returned, and he answered their questions in the same way he had answered Lena's questions, exactly, without padding, without apology. One of the lawyers, a woman in her 50s who had the look of someone who had seen every variation of contract dispute and found them all tiresome, looked up from the notebook after a long moment. You documented all of this contemporaneously. Every shift, he said. For 14 months. She looked at Lena, then back at Everett. She wrote something down. On the other side of the table, a man named Philip, who was the current head of Velmer Group supply chain operations, and who had been in his role for 3 years, and had not known the cold chain protocol existed until 48 hours ago, when Lena had sent him a summary document at 7 in the morning, said, I want to understand something. You've been working at a catering warehouse for 4 years. You designed the compliance system that runs our cold chain. And you didn't, he looked for the word, you didn't tell anyone? Everett looked at him. I told Carries. The room was quiet. I wasn't in the industry anymore, he said. I wasn't looking to be. I had an 8-month-old and a grief that was bigger than any of that. He said it plainly, without drama, the way you describe a season of weather. My daughter starts school at 8:15 and is done at 3. I wanted to be available for both. Philip looked at his own hands for a moment. He did not say anything else. Lena was looking at the window. The harbor again from a higher floor. She had the same view from the 3rd floor office, and she had never looked at it. She was looking at it now. The compensation figure was agreed to before the end of the meeting. It was retroactive. It was correct. It was not small. Everett sat with it for a moment when the document was placed in front of him. Then he signed it. He did not look at the number after he signed. He looked at the notebook. Outside in the hallway after, Lena walked beside him toward the elevator. They did not say anything for the first part of the walk. Then he said, without looking at her, You didn't have to dig that far. I know, she said. The elevator came. They got in. The doors closed. He said, Why did you? She looked at the elevator doors. Because my father built this company on people who did the work and didn't get the credit. And then he died before I understood that. And I have spent the last 6 years trying to run a company the way he would have wanted it run. And I don't always know what that looks like. She paused. But I know what it doesn't look like. The elevator opened on the lobby. They walked out into the Halifax afternoon, which was cold and very bright in the way November sometimes is, the sun with nothing left to prove but showing up anyway. She said, I have another meeting at 2. He said, I need to pick up Maisie at 3:20. There was a pause that was not awkward. Coffee, she said. Thursday. There's a place on Barrington. He looked at her. I know the one. He walked to his truck. She watched him go, then turned and walked back into the building. She did not look at the harbor view from the 3rd floor office that afternoon. She looked at the maintenance log she had brought with her, the copy Everett had made for the file. Every entry in the same small block, letters. Every date recorded. Every temperature noted. 14 months of showing up and writing it down when no one was watching and nothing would come of it. She thought about what Frank had said. He designed the protocol your entire cold chain runs on. She thought about Maisie, waving from across the school parking lot at a stranger in a borrowed car. She thought about a spiral notebook in a pharmacy bag, bent at the cover from a back pocket. She closed the file. Thursday came. The coffee shop on Barrington had 3 small tables and a woman behind the counter who had been there since 6 and was not going to let that go unnoticed. Lena was there first. Everett came in at 11:07, which meant he had planned for parking and found it faster than expected. He sat down across from her. They talked for 2 hours, not about the contract, not about IP law, about Halifax in November and a daughter who had informed him that morning that she intended to be a marine biologist or a forklift operator. She had not decided. About a father who would build something and a daughter who was still learning the shape of it. About Carrie's, who had marked the best pages of reports no one else had read. About what it felt like to be good at something and decide that something was not the most important thing anymore. The woman behind the counter refreshed their cups twice. She did not ask if they needed anything. She had been doing this long enough to know when a table needed to be left alone. Lena said, "At some point, that was past noon, I was in Singapore when my father had the coronary. Closing a deal he hadn't asked me to close." Everett did not say he was sorry. He said, "Did you make it back?" She looked at the cup in her hands. "I made it to the hospital. He was already gone." He nodded once. She said, "I keep thinking if I run the company well enough, it means I was right to be there. In Singapore. Closing the deal." She paused. "I don't think that's how it works." "No," he said. "I don't think it is, either." They sat with that for a moment. He paid for the coffees. She let him, because she understood that it was not about the coffees. Outside on Barrington Street, the wind came off the water and did the thing it always did, which was remind you that the harbor was right there and had opinions about it. She said, "There's a role at Velmer Group, Cold Chain Compliance Technical Advisory. It's Halifax-based." She said it to the street, not to him. He was quiet. "School hours flexible," he said after a moment. She looked at him. "Built into the contract." He looked at the street. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. He thought about Maisie on the bus on Tuesdays in the dark, which he had spent 4 years not wanting. He thought about a spiral notebook with 14 months of entries that had been waiting, without knowing what it was waiting for. "Okay," he said. That was all he said. She did not need more. 6 weeks later, Craig Dunn received a registered letter from the Velmer Group legal team informing him that the provisional supplier agreement had been formally terminated due to cold storage compliance failures and documentation discrepancies. The letter was 7 paragraphs and used the word representations in a way that did not mean anything good. He did not call to dispute it. He did not have Everett's personal maintenance log in his possession, and he suspected this was relevant, and he was correct. Everett's last day at Harwick and Dunn was a Friday. He did not make a speech. He cleaned his locker, returned the tools that were the company's, kept the ones that were his. He shook 2 hands and nodded at a third and picked up his bag. He walked out into the parking lot with the afternoon sun low and Halifax bright and the smell of the harbor running underneath everything the way it always did. He stood by his truck for a moment. He did not look back at the building. He called Maisie's school and told the office he would be doing pickup himself today. He got there 10 minutes early and stood on the pavement outside the door and waited with the other parents and did not check his phone. Maisie came out and saw him before he saw her. She ran the last 15 feet and hit him at speed, and he caught her the way you catch something you have been catching for years, without thinking, without adjusting, just already there. "Dad, you're here early." "I am. Are you fired?" He looked down at her. "What do you know about being fired?" Maisie shrugged with the elaborate nonchalance of a 6-year-old who had gathered information and was not revealing her sources. "Samantha's dad got fired and then they got a dog." He considered this. "I wasn't fired. I have a new job." Maisie processed this. "Does the new job have a dog?" "Not yet," he said. She seemed to find this provisional answer acceptable. She took his hand, and they walked to the truck, and he lifted her in and buckled her the way he had buckled her since she was small enough to need it differently, and they drove. On a Saturday in early December, Lena drove herself to the Quinpool Road neighborhood in the Subaru that was now simply the car she drove in Halifax. She pulled up in front of an apartment building with a small parking lot and a bench that someone had very recently repaired with new boards and different colored bolts, which told you everything you needed to know about who lived there. She knocked on the second-floor door. Maisie opened it with a felt-tip marker in one hand and a look that suggested she had been in the middle of a project of significant importance. "The coat lady?" she said. "I brought groceries," Lena said. She held up the bag. Maisie assessed this. "Can you make pasta?" "I can make pasta. I can make pasta. Dad can't make it that good," Maisie said, and stepped back to let her in. From the kitchen, without turning around, Everett said, "I can hear you, Maisie." "I know," Maisie said with serenity. Lena set the groceries on the counter. Everett turned. He looked at her for a moment with the look he had, the one she was learning, the one that was not quite a smile but lived in the same neighborhood. She started unpacking the bag. He reached past her for the garlic and their hands were close but not touching, and neither of them did anything about that. Because it was December and there was pasta to make and a 6-year-old explaining in the next room that the drawing on the table was not finished, and please don't put anything on top of it. They made dinner. 3 plates on a table that had been set for 2 for a long time. Maisie ate fast and talked faster. About the marine biology book Lena had put in the grocery bag. About a girl at school named Priya who was her best friend this week. About whether the bench in the parking lot had always been that color, or if it was new. "It's new," Everett said. "I knew it," Maisie said. "I knew it was new." She was asleep on the couch before 7:30, one arm around a worn stuffed seal named Captain. She had owned for so long the flippers were a different texture from the rest. Everett and Lena sat at the table after, with the dinner done and the plates moved, and the kitchen light doing what kitchen lights do in December, making everything inside look more possible than it probably is. He said, after a while, "I haven't had dinner with another adult in this apartment in 3 years. She said, "I haven't had dinner that wasn't a business meal in about the same." He looked at her across the table. She looked back. Neither of them said anything that was not already being said. From the couch, without opening her eyes, Maisie said, "You can stay, Miss Lena. There's a blanket in the closet." Everett closed his eyes briefly. Lena looked at the ceiling. Then she looked at Maisie, curled on the couch with her seal, already more than 3/4 asleep, making her small arrangements with the same certainty she brought to everything. Then she looked at Everett. He had the expression of a man whose 6-year-old has just said the truest thing in the room and knows it. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. "No," Lena said, "she's really not." Outside, Halifax was doing what Halifax does in December, which is get on with it. The wind off the water making no apologies. The harbor lights reflecting in long lines on the black water. The city carrying on without comment. Inside, a small girl slept under a blanket her father brought from the closet without being asked. Everett sat in the chair by the window. Lena sat on the other end of the couch with her shoes off, the marine biology book open on her knee, though she had not turned a page. It was 3 breaths in an apartment that had held 2 for a long time. It was enough, for now. It was more than enough. In a building that used to say Harwick and Dunn on the sign and now said nothing because Craig was in the middle of a rebrand he had not fully planned. A maintenance log sat in a filing cabinet in the correct folder, in the correct drawer. Every entry in the same small block letters, dated, accurate, unread by everyone who should have read it. Somewhere in the Velmer Group building on Hollis Street, the cold chain compliance protocol was running on 62 refrigerated vehicles, doing exactly what it had always done, keeping things at the right temperature, preventing loss, quietly saving more than it cost. The man who had written it was putting his daughter to bed 8 minutes away. The woman who had found it was sitting in his living room with a book she wasn't reading and nowhere she needed to be. That was the thing about good work. It didn't stop working just because no one was watching. It just waited, the way certain people wait without making a fuss, without demanding credit, until someone with the right eyes finally came along and looked.